the night I started Dad Edge was the night that I spanked my 4-year-old son, who is now 17. I wouldn't mess with him to save my life now because he's way bigger and stronger than me now. But I spanked him out of anger. And here's the kicker. I've told this story probably hundreds, if not 1,000 times, and it still gets to me every time because I still see that little kid's face. And that is when I spanked him, he fell because he's only 4. He's just a little guy. And I turned him, he acted out of line, and I turned him around. I whacked him on his butt and he fell. And immediately when he did that, I was like, oh my God, like what did I just do? And then I went to go pick him up and he rolled over and he saw me like coming at him with my hands, like, oh my gosh, like just to pick him back up. And he closed his eyes and he put his hands next to his face like this, please don't hurt me. Like that was like written all over his face. And that was so hard. And after that, I was like, this is not going to happen on my watch. This will not happen on my watch. I'm going to do whatever it takes to learn and grow and be better. And that's how Dad Edge got started.
Larry, welcome to the Point of Impact. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh man, Aaron, I got to tell you, man, this is such an honor to be on your show. Man, I'm excited to be here. So thank you so much.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm so glad as well. I'm glad in both directions, both sides of the table, because you've been at the podcast game for quite a while, and you're one of the graybeards of podcasting and dadship, fatherhood, and I can't wait to tap into what you've learned. But before we get into what you've been up to, what you're up to now, can you give the audience a little bit of the background? How did you become? What was Larry of yesterday?
Like yesterday or before Dad Edge?
Before Dad Edge.
Yeah. So I've been doing the podcast now for a decade, and I really kind of started my learning process back in 2012, I think it was. And so about 13 years of really trying to understand this whole game of fatherhood and marriage and the whole thing. And to be honest, man, the reason that I really wanted to be good at this is because I wasn't great at it at all. And I really, really had this deep desire to be a good dad. But me, like most, I mean, I think I grew up without that blueprint. And I think there's not that I'm special or an outlier. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people out there that grew up without, that template and that blueprint. And you kind of become unequipped. And my story is kind of unique. And I really do think that my drive for, to learn fatherhood really comes from being a kid and firsthand experiencing what it was like for me. So I'll explain that. My mom and biological father were married in 1971. They were really young when they got married. I think they were only like 21 years old. And so their relationship was kind of fast and furious, and they got married pretty young, pretty quick. And then 4 years later, they had me. And my dad was actually in the military as well. So he moved, my mom and him moved around quite a bit. And then they set up shop in San Francisco, California. In 1975, they had me. And then about 9 months after I was born, I think their relationship really hit a bad spot. And I think there was infidelity, I'm pretty sure, on both sides. But they were young, and it was kind of set up for failure, I think, to begin with. I think they were just sort of like infatuated with each other, and it just didn't work out. But, my dad, after a while, he just sort of, I didn't know who he was. He didn't come around. I think he did, visit me when I was younger, but of course I didn't remember it. And but he was completely out of my life when I was 4. And that's kind of when I remember just very faint memories, but I do remember being in preschool. And I remember men coming to pick up my friends, and I knew what a dad was. And I was like, oh, that's a dad. And some dads wear jeans, and some dads wear suits, and some dads wear ties and that kind of thing. And I don't have a dad yet, but I literally remember thinking this. I thought dads like moms, like find dads. And like we like magically appear by the stork, I guess. And like moms eventually go find a dad to bring them home. And then we have a dad. And that was my version. And so when I was 4, my mom had a full-time job and I was in preschool. And I'll never forget this, man. My mom told me one day, she's like, hey, I'm going to have a friend of mine over for dinner tonight. He's a very special friend of mine. I work with him and I really want you to meet him. And I think that was my mom's way of saying, I'm dating someone at work and we've been dating for quite some time. We're going to move it to the next level and it's time for you to meet him. So, when she told me that, like the first thing that popped in my mind was that must be the dad. And this guy walked in, I didn't say it out loud, but this guy walked in my house, and I'll tell you, you know, I remember Aaron. I remember this man walking in our house, and I still remember what he was wearing. He was wearing like this brown sort of trench coat. He was wearing this navy blue suit that was pinstriped. He was wearing a red tie that was double windsored, and he had feathered hair and a mustache. And I was like, and he was like he looked like a dad, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's the dad. So I shook his hand, and the very first thing I asked this guy, Aaron, was, "Are you going to be my dad?" Like I was just beaming, beaming as the kid, beaming, and I remember like my mom, like literally like gasping. Like I remember her like, like, and I remember him like awkwardly laughing and stuff like that. And but you know, it was magical, man. And I remember like that night, like it was yesterday. Like the guy like gave me so much attention. He played with me and talked to me, and they even both put me to bed at that night. Like I remember that, and I was like, this is awesome. And then like 6 months later, they got married. I think my mom kind of like took that as a sign, that, you know, like I got to find this kid a dad, and she married him. And I think she married him with best of intentions, but it really didn't work out. They were only together until I was about 10. And the longer they were together, the worse things got. Like he was a big drinker, so was my mom, and they fought a lot. They argued a lot. Like they hit each other a lot. I was hit a lot. My dad was very abusive when he got drunk. And there was, the longer they were together until I was at the age of 10, I don't really ever remember them, like those last few years, ever being happy. Like there was always tension in the air. There's always unpredictability. There's always drinking and fighting. And I was just like, man, this is, but you know what? The thing about it was, when I remember being that age, and my interpretation of that was, well, you know, this is what happens. This is like life. This is what like even like my friends, like they were spanked. Like I remember like my friends like getting whooped with belts. So it's like it wasn't like it was abusive, don't get me wrong, but it was like for that time of, I guess, that era, it didn't seem like abuse. It just seemed like you did something wrong, you got beat down, right? And then, but something really interesting happened at 10. Like they got divorced, and then he completely left. And dude, I've never seen him since. In fact, I found out about 15 years ago he died, and never saw him again. And then, but here's the kicker. When I was 12, you know, I learned about the birds and the bees, obviously between the ages of 10 and 12. And I started asking my mom questions. I'm like, wait a second. I'm like putting these pieces together, the timeline together. This guy came in my life at 4. Like, where did I come from? And I asked my mom, I'm like, hey, where did I come from? Um, did like what happened? And so she told me, she's like, actually, I used to be married, and you have a dad out there. And I was like, wait, what? How long were you married for? Like, what do you mean I have a dad? And she's like, I was married for 4 years, and you have a dad, and yeah, I don't know where he's at. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea. And then one thing kind of led to another, and as the universe and karma and serendipity will give you, or you know, what I believe in, God and faith, and I ended up accidentally meeting my father. And I won't get into it just for the sake of time, but at 12 years old, I met my biological father, and he only lived 3 miles from us. And dude, I was overjoyed. I was like so excited. Like immediately started calling him dad. He was remarried, had a 2 year old son. He had another one on the way. And I was just like over the moon. And he really like dug in, and like he came to my weekly little league games. He would take me to practice. Like I'd be over at his house. Like I called him dad, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest thing ever. And then it was about 4 or 5, maybe 6 months into our relationship, and I just started feeling that there was like tension between us. I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I remember calling him one night because we had kind of drifted, and I remember picking up the phone, just wondering like what was going on, or if I did something wrong. And I remember calling him, and I'll be honest, Aaron, I don't remember what the words were. All I remember was that was the end of our relationship, and we parted ways. And I just remember I couldn't really comprehend the gravity of that. And I just sort of kind of gave up as a kid. And I, you know, became an emotional eater. I gained a lot of weight. I kind of gave up on school. I failed the 8th grade, Aaron. I had to do 8th grade twice. And but that was kind of a real turning point for me. I went on to high school, went on to college, My mom was married a total of 3 times, and she dated several men in between that were kind of these would be father figures, but every guy was the same kind of guy, just heavy drinker, abuser, toxic, like didn't really want much to do with me, want all about my mom type thing. And I noticed that me and my mom's even relationship would become close when she was single, and then I it would drift when she had a man in her life. So it was really weird and unpredictable there too. But I went on to college, got my degree in sports medicine with a minor in nutrition. Met my wonderful wife, who I'm still married to today. We're celebrating 23 years of marriage this year, and but something really interesting happened when I was 30, and this is kind of where the story really takes a turn. So I was married for a couple of years, and we had our first son on the way, and I had a job in surgical device sales, and great job, very lucrative. And I was like, man, this is great, and didn't really know like direction or anything. And but I did know that we were on a good path. And I was in a coffee shop for a meeting, and I remember looking up because this guy walked in, and I looked up and just took notice to him, and I was like, oh my gosh, would you look at that? That's my father. He walked in to get his morning coffee at this coffee shop. And I knew exactly who he was when he walked in. There was no doubt. He had just a little older, a little rounder, but same guy. And that serendipitous moment has now turned into a 20-year relationship. So I do have a relationship with my father. He's still married to the same amazing woman. My stepmom is an amazing person. They've been married for 45 years. I have 2 younger half brothers. My youngest half brother, I'm insanely close to. But I'll tell you, growing up like um, that was crazy to say the least. And when I became a father, I knew a few things. I was like, I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to be a good husband, and I'm never going to hit my kids out of anger. And Aaron and I broke all 3 of those promises, all 3. And the night I started Dad Edge was the night that I spanked my 4-year-old son, who is now 17. I wouldn't mess with him to save my life now because he's way bigger and stronger than me now. But I spanked him out of anger. And here's the kicker. And I've told this story probably hundreds, if not 1,000 times, and it still gets to me every time because I still see that little kid's face. Um, and that is when I spanked him, he fell because he's only 4. He's just a little guy, and I turned him. He acted out of line, and I turned him around. I whacked him on his butt, and he fell. And immediately when he did that, I was like, "Oh my god! Like, what did I just do?" And then I went to go pick him up, and he rolled over, and he saw me like coming at him with my hands, like, "Oh my gosh!" Like just to pick him back up. And he closed his eyes and he put his hands next to his face, like this. Please don't hurt me. Like that was like written all over his face. And that was so hard. And after that, I was like, this is not going to happen on my watch. This will not happen on my watch. I'm going to do whatever it takes to learn and grow and be better. And that's how Dad Edge got started. And it still is the same. Like I'm still learning. I've been doing this for 12 plus years, still learning. Like, and I will never, ever, ever stop learning this game of fatherhood and being a husband because it's so dynamic. It always changes. But that's my story. And if I guess at the crux of it and at the end of it, and if there's hope out there, is I want every man to know you don't have to know what you're doing. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to have this drive and desire to go out and find them and learn, right? Because that is the game changer right there, is when we learn. So that's the story, brother.
I can't imagine uh, your kids you recoiling from you and afraid of you. You're supposed to be the protector, right? The safe harbor from all the dangers in the world. So I can just imagine the feeling there when you're the bad guy in the story. It's definitely puts a fine point. Makes it that's a great driver there for change, for learning, for development. I also can't imagine anybody tying a double Windsor
Right.
uh, anymore.
Yeah.
That's a lost art. So, how did you start this journey of educating yourself, getting better? becoming the father you really set out to be, you really wanted to be?
I actually started it as a Facebook page. And because at the time, like, I didn't know anything about websites, or I had no idea what even blogging was or anything. I mean, I kind of knew what it was, but I was like, I don't know what that is. And so the easiest thing for me to do is I just started a Facebook page. And I didn't, here's the funny thing, I didn't start it for a following. It was actually just my page. Like, I was just like, I just want like a digital sort of journal, like a diary of things that I'm learning. And then as I learn them, I'm just going to share them, right? Because if I share them and I post them, then it's kind of like my journal. It's kind of like my diary in a way, right? And I just started learning things. I would go out and I'd research things. I'd read books. I'd research things. I would really, really get entrenched with learning, what it meant to be a good man, right? To be a good husband, to have a growth mindset. Like, I like it. At the heart of it, it was personal development, and I couldn't get enough of it. Like, any books like on Tony Robbins, and like Unbeatable Mind was a big book for me back then too. Like, I just read and researched and researched, and then I would just post things that I was learning. And then very organically, like, it just grew. And here's the funny thing, in 12 years of doing this, I've never once bought an ad on Facebook. We just literally last week hired our very first marketing agency to help us with ads. And that's because we really thought that that was necessary to get to people, because the political arena right now is there's so many eyes on it. That's all people are focused on. So to cut through some of that, we figured we're going to have to start marketing for this. But I've never bought an ad or anything like that. And it grew very big organically. And I was like, I had no idea, like, and then after a time, like, following started to happen. In the 2013, I launched gooddadproject.com, which was my first blog. And that really didn't take off or do anything. But to be honest, I wasn't looking for it to take off or do anything. Things didn't even really start to take off until I made a decision in 2015 to start podcasting. And it was only because I got kind of burnt out on writing. I was like, I really want to talk to people. And I started podcasting, and it took about a year. And then all of a sudden it just exploded. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Well, maybe there's something here. Maybe it's, beyond just me and what I need. And that's how it started, was really just that first year of podcasting.
And what were you what was the objective with the podcast?
Oh man, the objective is actually still the same. The objective for the podcast was, I just want to talk to people smarter than me. And I want to talk to people about their expertise. And then I want to view their expertise through the lens of being a better man, husband, and father. And
Hmm.
that's really what I've done. And then, and it's still that way. So I still view myself behind this microphone. I view this as I'm in the front row of the classroom. My guest is the expert, and I get to ask all the questions. And then, because it's a podcast and it's public, whoever wants to tune in and listen with me and learn with me can learn. And that's how I view it, and always have.
It certainly gives you access to other fathers, other people that you wouldn't normally have. Which I think is excellent. That's why I love having podcasts myself. I get to talk to people uh, I really want to talk to. So, what do you think is what are some of the most important things you've learned? Like, what did you get? Are there any surprises along the way talking to these dads? Any epiphanies that you thought were bedrock before?
Yeah, so here's one epiphany, um, that I it's always really rang true, and that is, if you don't know how to be a good father and husband, and I say that with so much context of like being good. I think just about every man out there has good intention, right? But if you don't know what to do as a husband and father, well, welcome to the club. You're in good company, right? And if you don't know what to do as a father, like, well, welcome to the club. You're in good company. But I always tell men this. I was like, man, if you don't know what you're doing, you know what? Number one, most people don't. And it's probably not your fault that you don't know what to do, because it's not like they pull you aside in high school and they're like, hey, we just launched this new class. It's on conflict resolution, communication, how to develop more intimacy in your marriage when you guys get married. It's not like you take like several classes on parenting before you become a parent. But quadratic equations, you can learn that in school, right? And that's really useful. But I think the tough love that I have there is if you don't know what you're doing, you're in good company and it's probably not your fault. But here's the rub and here's the tough love. If you don't know what you're doing, it is your fault if you don't go learn, because now there are resources out there that are endless, right? And I think men now have a better chance now more than ever to overcome their own story and I'll just say for what it is, their own BS story about how they can't be a good dad because of maybe where they came from or what they did or whatever. You can learn anything you want. It's no different than like yourself, like in the military, right? I mean, not every single man who goes to basic training has a desire to be in the military, but they don't know what they're doing yet until they are trained to do so. And then once they're trained to do so, well, now they're much more equipped to go out and do their job, right? But throwing like, you know, a man or a woman, doesn't matter, into the battlefield without any training. Like, I mean, can you imagine showing up to basic training and like, hey, yeah, we've done away with basic training. We're actually just going to deploy you tomorrow, and here's your weapon, and here's all your uniform, and don't worry, you'll figure it out. Best time of your whole life. But that's fatherhood and marriage, right?
Well, don't get me started on how many soldiers on the battlefield act like they never went through basic. But uh, yeah, that's no, it's kind of fatherhood. The head scratcher, and what do I do in this situation? Wing it. Was that the impetus behind the alliance? How long until that came along?
Yeah. So I was podcasting for a year, and I started having, the audience, I started having people reach out to me for coaching, and I'm like, coaching, I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Why would I try to teach you what to do? I don't even know what I'm doing.
Have you been listening to the show? I don't know what I'm doing.
Haven't you heard all the dumb things I do? But I decided, I joined so the Alliance is our mastermind community for dads, husbands, and fathers. And I'll tell you that that's a group of very uncommon men, right? Because they step into something that they have to sidestep their ego and be like, hey, I want to learn. I want to be uncommon. I want to learn how to lead and be a better father, better husband, all those things. And I didn't really understand what that was until I joined my first mastermind in 2015. And I remember like the mastermind, how it was described to me. And I remember my first mentor and everything. And I was like, what is this? I don't understand this. Like, what do you mean mastermind? And I'll never forget, even the price tag for the mastermind was $500 a month. And that was 10 years ago. And the Alliance is only $97 a month, but $500 a month. And it was more high level, but I was like, $500 for what? And my mentor was like, just trust me, just join and you'll get it when you're in there. And I'm like, okay. And 10 a.m. every Monday, I'll never forget jumping into my very first meeting with these men. And we talked. I knew these guys for 15 minutes, and they welcomed me in. And immediately, no small talk. We're getting right to the heart of like, how's your mental health? How's your marriage? How's your communication with your wife? How's your intimacy with your wife? What is it like with your kids? How's your patience level with that? How can we help you with that? It was like, Aaron, all the questions of life that I ever wanted to know were in that room. And that first meeting, I was like, this is what a mastermind is? Oh man, I'm in. I stayed in that thing for a year and I could not get enough of it. And it was after a year, I was like, I think I'm going to go start this for fathers and husbands and just see what happens. I went out and I asked 10 people that I knew were kind of big fans and that had kind of messaged me. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about starting something. Here's what it looks like. And they were like, we're in. Yeah, let's do it. And that's how the Alliance got started. I invited 15 people in, and we've been going for almost 10 years. It's crazy.
And how many members now?
We have about 800 members, and I think over the past 10 years, we've helped about 4,000 guys, 4 or 5,000 guys.
That's incredible. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in yourself since starting the Dad Edge, podcast, like the Facebook journal blog page?
I have found that talking about the good and the bad has been really relatable for people,
Hmm.
and just never being afraid to ask any question. Like a question, like a question that might be burning on some man's mind is like, hey man, like my wife and I don't really feel that close right now. Our intimacy is off. Like, I don't know how to talk to her. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like what do I do? Like those types of questions and conversations, man, I love stuff like that because that's where I think we can truly help people. But I think for me, what's really helped me, I'll just share like a high level thing. My oldest son is graduating high school in a week, and my wife decorated our house, our upstairs, with pictures. She got 300 pictures of him printed off, everything from him, like literally infancy, all the way to him being 19 now. And she just posted them all over the house. And we live in a ranch, so it's on the main level. And Aaron, I went through there and I looked at every single photo and all these memories and all these connections and all these moments with these kids. And he's obviously one of four boys that I have. And I literally sat back and I thought to myself, thank God for this mission and thank God for this movement, because I don't think this would have ever happened. I don't think these moments I would have never been a part of. I'll be really honest with you, Aaron. If it wasn't for this mission, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't. I was so lost, and I know for a fact I would have been divorced. I know I would have two boys and not four, and those two boys probably wouldn't want much to do with me, and I would have lived a very sort of tragic life in a way, of my kids not probably wanting much to do with me, and my wife not wanting much to do with me. And I think if I really dial in what we do and what I've really learned the skills of how to connect with my wife, how to love my wife best, and how to love my wife in the way that she receives it, not necessarily in the way that I want to give it. As far as my boys, like I know how to connect with them. I know that their three needs are to feel seen, heard, and safe, no matter what age they are, no matter if they're a boy or a girl, that's their needs. And if I can fulfill those needs and I can connect with them, that's a good thing, because with connection, I can have influence. Without connection, I have no influence, right? So my main goal is to always connect with my kids. I never knew how to do that. Um, you always hear about these kids talking about, or these young adults talking about, like, man, I had the best dad. I had a great dad. My dad talked to me. He played with me. He was in my life. He wasn't just a box checker. Like, that guy really cared about me. He took time with me and really, really was a powerful force in my life. I was not that guy. I can honestly say that I'm that guy now more than I was. Um, but it's taken so much. It's taken a lot of work.
After these messages, we'll be right back. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Extraordinary Delights, UODFudge.com. Extraordinary Delights is a disabled veteran, family owned small business making handcrafted fudge and other sweet treats for the chocolate loving patriots just like you. Go to EODFudge.com and check out some of our delicious flavors like triple threat chocolate with or without walnuts, mint dark chocolate, strawberry and creamy white chocolate, or my personal favorite, American Pick Me Up, an all American version of tiramisu. While you're there, go to the apparel store and check out our awesome t-shirts, polos, and the baddest tactical apron on the market. You see me wear on the TikTok show, Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. So right now, go over to eodfudge.com and pick out some fudge, other sweet treats for that patriot in your life with a sweet tooth. That's eodfudge.com. eodfudge.com. And now, back to the show. I know you've mentioned before about having to consciously override this operating system of yours, the automatic responses to your kids' behaviors. And can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what do you mean by overriding your operating system?
Yeah. So I think I think what you're talking about is like the difference between your reaction, right, and response, maybe when your kids are maybe acting a fool. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. So, I one thing that we talk about a lot in the dad edge community is, control the controllables, which is we control us. We don't necessarily control outside factors. We have influence, but we don't control that. And so, like, for instance, if your kid is acting out or whatever, throwing a temper tantrum, we have a choice to make as a dad. We can either, respond, or we can react. And when we react, which most of us do, and let me explain what reaction I think really means for a lot of guys out there. When we react, when we like lose our patience, it really comes from a place of fear a lot of times, like fear of like, I don't know what to do. I don't even know what the next step is. And I'm frustrated that I don't even know that. So I just act out with anger. And the way for me to control this situation is not with a skill I've learned, but to yell with intensity and react with intensity so I can stop whatever it is that's happening in front of me. Versus like, wait a second, let me learn this, and let me understand how to go about this and respond. So like, I think one of the greatest comparisons of this is jujitsu. I mean, jujitsu is a very popular martial art right now. And one thing about jujitsu is you have to be patient. You have to be calm. If you panic and react, you're done, right? Because number one, you'll gas yourself out. You can't think, and your opponent is just waiting for you to make a mistake. And when you're reactionary and emotional, you're going to make mistakes. It's the guys who can actually remain calm, right? Where that rear naked choke is starting to slide in. You're like, slow down, hang on. What step by step, how do I get out of this? Right? How do I maneuver? Right? And it's like that slow, patient response versus like just erratic behavior and reaction, because that's not going to win that match. Right? It might get you out of the hold for a second, but it's not going to help you. And what we teach guys is that response technique, is that calm technique that they can use when when they feel like they got nothing else.
How many boys do you have?
I have four.
And one daughter, or
No, all
uh,
boys.
all boys?
Yeah.
Uh, I've got three boys, a
Yeah,
14
I
year
know.
old and identical twin 6 year olds, because I shouldn't be the only one confused. But yeah, it drives me nuts that you say one thing over and over and over again, right? Yeah, push in your chair, pick up your clothes, all that kind of stuff, and I want to react. Right? I want to point my finger. I want to get loud, but you've got that pushes them away. That shuts them down, right? Like it puts them on the defensive. How do you turn that around into an opportunity to get them closer, to become that dad you heard others talk about?
So let me preface this with saying I don't get this right all the time. Like, I'll give you an example. My 9-year old, he's kind of like, he's a typical 9-year old, and he he has a tough time right now listening, and it's a little unnerving. It's like if there's a squirrel, quote unquote, a squirrel in the room, whether that's a TV or a switch or a toy or something, right? You're trying to talk to him. You have his attention for about a half of a millisecond, and then he's looking at something else, and then you just said something to him, and he totally didn't catch it, and then he's doing something else. So like yesterday, I'll be really honest with you. Like right now, I wrecked my knee a few weeks ago, so I ruptured my patella tendon in my knee, so I can't really do much right now. I just had surgery about 6 or 8 days ago, and so I'm on crutches and I can't put any weight on it. So when I walk around, quote unquote, walk around this house, both hands are occupied. I can't even get like my own cup of water right now. So um, I asked my 9-year old, I was like, hey, would you mind getting my cup that's in the mudroom and refilling it and bringing it to me? And he like went and got another cup and started refilling it. And like, I knew he didn't listen. And while like, this is so minor, even as I tell this story, I'm like, God bless, you are such an idiot. Right. But like, I, I was triggered because we're really trying to dial in on his listening, and he just isn't doing it, and I would say most of the time, 80% of the time I'm responsive. 20% of the time I'm an idiot. And at this point I was an idiot. And I looked at him and I was like, Colton, I was like, put the cup down. And he looked at me. I was like, when someone is speaking to you, I was like, stop being distracted and listen to the person speaking to you. I was like, that is not what I said. I said, my cup is in the mudroom, not don't get me a new cup. It's in the mudroom. Go get that one and refill that one. I was like, when people are speaking to you, stop looking around, stop being distracted, look at the person and listen. And you could just tell he crumbled. Now, I will say this. I do think that there's a time and a place for that. And sometimes I do think that that's justified. In that moment, I did think that that was somewhat justified because I did have to rattle him just a little bit because he does that kind of stuff all the time. And I'm like, man, I need you to learn this. And there are some times I think that dads need to pull that lever, but I think that that's the exception, not the rule. But in those instances, like I could tell, I really hurt his feelings. Like, and here he was doing me a favor, right? I mean, like he's helping me. And I saw these tears well up in his eyes and he did it for me. And then he went on the couch and he just sort of sat there and then he went to school. And here's the good news about when you screw up. When you screw up, um, you are going to screw up. Everybody's going to screw up, but there's a beautiful opportunity when you do. And here's the opportunity. When he came home from school, I could tell like he was sort of distant from me. Like he was just like, hey, this guy's a jerk, whatever. But he was distant from me. And I said, hey, Colton, come here. And he kind of like hesitated, kind of looked at me, and I just hugged him. And I said, there was no need for me to talk to you the way I did like that this morning. I was like, you were doing me a favor. I was like, I shouldn't speak to you that way. And I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about that. I was like, that you didn't deserve that kind of reaction. I was like, and you do need to listen. I was like, when people do speak to you, people, you need to listen and stop being distracted by other things and that kind of thing. I was like, do you understand what I'm talking about? And he's like, yeah, I do. And I could tell that got to him and that kind of thing. But I think the cool thing about it is that whenever we have a blow up like that, we have a tremendous opportunity to show humility and ownership and teach kids what it means to say, I'm sorry, I did this, I hurt you, and I'm asking you for forgiveness, even though I'm your dad, right? And I think what that teaches, I just did a podcast with my oldest son yesterday on ownership because he's very good at ownership. And one of the things that he always does is, man, when I'm wrong, he's like, I'll admit it. So I think even here's the good news, right? When we screw up, when we lose our patience, when we get reactive like that, we have a tremendous opportunity to show and exemplify what it means to ask for forgiveness and show ownership. And that's going to do nothing but I think teach them that.
I think that's one of the most important things we can teach our kids is that ownership, radical responsibility. Jocko's extreme ownership, man, being able to apologize, eat a little crow when you screw up, and hopefully they're paying attention to that just as much or more than you know when you get a little bit loud. Uh, but I was just thinking about the attention span and having 6 year old twins that bounce off each other like charged ions. Uh, I'll try to talk to one of them, and there's another one just like right. I can feel them behind my back, like making faces. Yeah, sometimes literally have to hold each by the wrist, and I can feel them trying to like just the nervous energy, that kid energy just moving. They're in constant motion. I'll talk to one of them, and by the time I finish the sentence, he's already in another room. Like, where did you go? Not, uh, yeah, it's a tough one because as men, sometimes that male pride does get in the way of doing what's right.
I agree.
Are there any mm, rituals, practices, family things that you do with the family that help you instill some of that, bond, grow the bond, grow the relationship?
Absolutely. So I think, so first of all, we're big on this family. I mean, we're a family of six, but we're very big on one-on-one time, making sure that each kid has time with both my wife and I. When I say both my wife and I, even separately, because we want each kid to have a connection to us. So we're really really big on one-on-one time. You got to get really creative with it from time to time. But the thing that we're most interested in this house, believe it or not, is simplicity and connection. So our values here are an environment of deep human connection and safety. That's what we're all about. That's what Team Hagner is all about. In order to do that, we do several things in this family on a daily basis that invites that kind of deep human connection in. So, like for instance, here's one way. We try, not all the time, but we try to approach every interaction and every conversation with curiosity and appreciation versus expectation and agenda. I think a lot of times when people talk to each other, even in families, they approach that person with expectation and agenda. So it's like, hey man, I have an agenda that I want to talk to you about, and I have an expectation on how I want that conversation to turn out. Versus like, what is this conversation? What is the fruit of this conversation, this connection going to be? So I'll give you an example. Traditionally, we don't like to ask the question in our house, how was your day? Because that does not provide really any connection. It doesn't provide any even brain power to answer that question. And it's a really, in my opinion, a really poor question, but it's a default question that everybody asks. Instead, I always encourage people, and we do the same, is ask creative questions that are more generative in nature. Generative meaning like you have to generate thought and story and detail around that question. So like a good example of this might be like, tell me something today that you're proud of, or tell me about the best part of your day, or tell me something about your day that was funny to you. What I'm really trying to do with that question is I want the kid to, number one, brighten up and search for the gratitude in his day, and then for him to tell me about it. Because what I'm really doing there is I'm not only getting to hear about his day and getting a bird's eye view into his world, but I'm also helping and training that kid to go into that day and pick out the gratitude in that day. Because human beings, we're wired to always search for what's wrong, broken, and missing, not what's working well, right? And when we talk about the things that are working well, that can set us up for a day, for a much better experience throughout our day. Another question I ask the kids, and I love this question because I think it really creates a growth mindset in a kid. It creates a kid who's a decision maker, a problem solver, and you also create an environment, what we call in Dad Edge, an environment of psychological safety. And I'll explain what that means. So here's what I asked too. I'm like, tell me something you failed at today, and tell me what you learned from it, or tell me something that was a huge challenge for you. How'd you get through it? Now, in a kid's world, they usually steer away from those questions, or they don't even want to tell you because they feel like they're just going to get reamed, for it, or they're just going to get, berated with guilt or shame or pain or blame or something like that. So like an example of that would be like, hey, so tell me something today that was challenging for you. And I might get they might be like, I got a D on the science test. And now, normally, the way I grew up, you got a D on the science test. Like, what do you mean you got a D on the science test? I knew you didn't study. You were wasting your time. When are you going to learn that you need to study and school is important? And then what the kid is basically saying is like, okay, I can't really tell you anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way I respond, the way we teach to respond to that is, oh man, I bet that was kind of hard to tell me, huh? Good dude, good on you, man. Like, thanks for telling me that. So tell me more about that, right? What I'm doing there is I'm praising them for having the courage to tell me something, right? And then when I say tell me more about that, that's an invite for them to tell me detail versus why did you get an F? Because if I say why did you get an F, that decimates psychological safety. Now the kid feels defensive and they don't want to tell you, or they feel fear to tell you. But if you say, tell me about that, like what happened?
Well, you touched on the emotion right off the bat. Like that was tough. Wow.
Yeah, you validate what they're feeling, like, oh man, that's tough, right? Like, tell me more about that. And then what you do is after they tell you, they're like, okay, well, let's do this. Nobody, I'm sure, likes an F, and I'm sure you don't like it either. If you had to do the situation all over again and get ready for this test, what would you have done different? And then they get to tell you how they solve their own problem versus being lectured by us. And then they walk away from a conversation like that feeling like $1 million. Like, oh my gosh, like dad is the easiest guy in the world to talk to. And I just feel like I learned something, right? Versus he just talked down at me and shamed me and blamed me and lectured me. And here's the cool thing about a question like that. You ask that question on a daily basis or even a few times a week, you're getting in reps that your kid knows that you're the safe person to talk to. because when they're 17, 18, 19 years old, they're at the party and they drank for the first time or they did drugs, and they have that choice of they're going to get behind the wheel or they're going to call you. They're going to look back at all the experiences and all the interactions that they had with you and decide, is dad the right guy for me to call, or is he just going to blast me? Right. And I would much rather I would much rather have them call. So creating environments of psychological safety is having an experience with somebody that you can tell them whatever it is that's going on without blame, shame, pain, or blame, and learn from it, right? Versus being chastised for it.
It's nothing. That's not. I've never screwed up like that before. Uh, I'm never blaming the boys or pointing fingers or scolding. I'm always doing exactly what you just suggested.
Right. Don't
No,
we all?
no. I could feel pure
Yeah.
guilt when you're explaining that. Oh man, I need to work on it. But
I do
yeah,
too. I mean, I'm not always great at it either. There are times I'm great at it and there are times I fall on my face with it. But, I think if that's more or less your operating system, and sometimes you're going to go against your operating system, you're going to mess up. But I think if you do the 80, if 80% of the time, if you're operating like that, they get it, they know you're going to screw up sometimes too.
okay. How did you get? How many have been through the young teens so far?
Yeah. So I have 19 and 17, 11-year old. So I've got one that's kind of a tweenish. So, and then I've got a 9-year old.
Okay. Yeah. How did you get them through that bathing in cologne phase?
Oh my gosh, so my 11-year old's going through that, right? He's going through that with, in other words, like he, every day is a shower. He's got his clothes out the night before. He knows exactly what he's wearing to school. He's got his cologne sitting right next to his. I don't know what it is. I think it's like the girl thing. Like the girls are now
Mm,
taking notice, and so like it's now the cool thing. But yeah, my 9-year old, like he's like shower. Yeah, I don't want to do that. No, I don't like
mm,
that.
mm. Oh man, it's hilarious because it's like step by step what I did when I was going through that puberty, middle school, and I don't know, what if my son actually listened to any of these podcasts, he wouldn't appreciate me sharing this, but uh, he he wasn't. I felt his hair. I tussled his hair one day, and it was kind of greasy. And I was like, "Did you take a shower?" Yeah. Did you wash your hair? Well, I got it wet. You didn't use shampoo. Well, one of my friends said that it would look thicker, fuller if I only washed my hair like every 3 days or something. I'm like, what? You're going through this hormonal, your change, your body's changing. You're producing so much grease on your hair right now. Trust you, that's not a good look for you. That's not thick or fuller. That's just greasy. Yeah, go get back in the shower.
Go get back in the shower. Yeah, exactly. It's so funny.
Yeah, but yeah, I can smell that cologne, and I'm a blind guy, good, pretty sensitive nose, and I'm just like, oh man, thank goodness you're not wearing what my first cologne was that Walmart uh preferred stock or
Oh my God, I remember that.
whew.
I totally remember that.
Anyways, um, you've also got a couple books out, and the first one, Dad Edge, is more of lessons learned, almost like a self help sort of tome, whereas your second one is more of a treatise. It's a more of a contemplative thing between spirit and religion and being a father. Can you tell me what that? Yeah, I'm almost done with it now, and I really do appreciate it. But can you tell me where was the inspiration for that?
You want to hear a really funny story about that? I think the how that book came about is almost as, yeah, it's interesting. It's almost more interesting than the book itself. So in 2022, I wrote a book called The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. And that when I wrote The Dad Edge back in 2015, I mean, it was 9 chapters long, and it was basically 9 different skills, and just to help a guy, just to help a guy out with like the basic stuff. And I would say like that was like elementary school compared to what we're doing now. But I still think, the book still sells great, and it still get great reviews on it. Guys love it. It's a very easy read. But I wrote Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood back in 2022 after 7 years of really learning and doing a lot of deep work on this topic of marriage and parenting and manhood and raising young men and all this other stuff. And I wrote Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood, and that's a beefy book, 284 pages. And I loved writing that book. I had a publisher and everything, and we were set to launch in September of 2022. 6 weeks before my book launch, the publisher went bankrupt. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, well, what do I do now? And so the publisher was like, well, we can either self-publish this. I can show you how to do that, or I can just sign the rights over to your book back to you. And I was like, I'll just take the rights back. I hired an agent, and I was like, I sent it to her. She spent 40 years in the literary space, and she read the book. She's like, I love this book. I'd love to rep it. And so she went shopping, big publishers with it. Morehouse Publishing called a meeting with us, and they're like, we would love to, yeah, we like the book, but we have a different idea for you. And I was like, okay, what's the idea? And they're like, we actually want you to write a new book. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we want you to write a new book. We want you to write a book called Spirit of Fatherhood, a faith-based approach to fatherhood, a Christian-based. And I was like, are you serious? And now granted, like I've always believed in God. I've always had faith, but I would say my faith really turned up the volume in 2020. And I really, really got in touch with it. And I've been deep with it ever since. And so I was like 2 years into my kind of like renewal of this and like really understanding it and still learning it to this day. And I was like, well, why would you guys want me to write that book? And they're like, well, we just had a female author write what's called The Beauty of Motherhood. And it was a faith-based approach to motherhood, and it's killing it. It's like selling like gangbusters. And we loved working with her. And we think you're the guy to write this book for fathers. And I looked at him and I was like, I am not the guy to write this book. I was like, I am not an expert on this topic. I don't know much, I'm learning like that. I think you got the wrong guy. And they kind of smiled and they're like, that's exactly why we want you to write it, because you are learning and you have this knack of, being a student and sharing just knowledge as a student versus as a guru, which we think is much more relatable. This way you are on the podcast. And I was like, I think I can get behind that. Like I can do that. Sure. And so I was like, okay, well, when do you need it? And this was in August of 2022. And they're like, we want to launch it next year on Father's Day. I was like, okay, great. So you need it like what, March? And they're like, no, we need it in 11 weeks. And I was like, 11 weeks? I was like, you want me to write a book in 11 weeks? And this is before ChatGPT. Not that I would use ChatGPT to write a book, but I was like, how in the world am I going to write a book on this topic in 11 weeks? And I'll tell you, I think God has a way of showing up in your life. And it's kind of funny. I'm sitting here talking to you about a knee injury. At that exact same time, I busted my other knee, and I was sitting on my rear end, couldn't do much, and had time to write a book. And I cranked that thing out in 9 weeks. And then it launched. And I didn't think we could make it happen, but we did. And now this year I'm releasing Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood. But I'll tell you, Aaron, Spirit of Fatherhood was a challenge for me. Like that one made me, I think anybody who's ever written a book, they'll tell you I grew because I wrote the book. Like it wasn't because I knew everything about the subject. It was because I had to know more about the subject, and I had to grow into whatever it is I was writing about because I had to know it. And that book really made me grow in my faith, I think, even more. And it was a scary project for me, but I was glad they had faith in me, and I'm glad that I took it on.
It sounds like a great opportunity for some growth to learn. Uh, sounds I love taking on challenges, and that's like just imagining it. I'm like just learning how to be a dad and barely touch the surface of my faith. And you want me to do what? I got a similar suggestion on my Facebook page. I've written a couple introspective, long-winded posts not even on a page or anything, just in my feed. And your feedback was, "You got to write a book." I'm like, "What? I haven't. That's not. I could barely figure out how to do the podcast or the Facebook page, and that's. Um, I'm waiting for something interesting to happen. But oh, what are you looking forward to most? Where do you see this going in 5, 10, 20 years? What do you want to see when you look back?
The thing that I'm really interested in now, Aaron, is generational impact. It's no longer about just the dads. It's now about the families. It's now about our kids having a better shot at this. It's now taking everything that we learn and not becoming a pond, but becoming a river, right? And spreading this knowledge to the next generation. I think it's safe to say that every generation that we've had has left an imprintable mark on the generation that we are now, right? And I would say while today's society, we definitely have our challenges. You don't have to look far for that, but there's also a lot of beauty in it. There's a lot of resources now that, I mean, if you rewind the tape, like when you and I grew up, we didn't have nearly the technology, the resources that we do now. And I think if you're ever going to spread evil and spread, horrible things, and you can do that very easily. And if you want to spread good and you want to spread skills and you want to spread, things that will help the next generation become better men and women, fathers and families and moms and all that good stuff, you can do that too. And that's what I'm really interested in over the next, I think, 5 years. Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood is going to be the fifth book that I've written. And not to say that dad edge has to do with me, but my goal is that the dad edge is on the dinner table of every family in America. And what I mean by that is, conversation starter card games, things like that. We're going to be launching an app soon with resources where men can like just be anywhere and be like, man, I'm really struggling with patience. Like, what do I do right now? They can plug into our app and they can read something, or they can, pull up a quick video, and it'll give them, a resource and a refreshment of what to go do. What is the right next thing that they get to go do? But I think what's really important, like what we're doing in the Dad Edge community in the Alliance, is we're encouraging these guys like, hey, if you're learning the skill of tactical empathy with emotional validation, teach that to your kids. If you're learning a conflict resolution skill like what we call the cube, which by the way is not our skill, that was a skill that was taught to us by Clear Leadership, clearleadership.com. Every time we talk about that skill, the cube, we always have to point it back to give credit where credit's due. But like a skill like that, where people can learn actually how to have a conversation and have conflict resolution without blasting each other and hurting each other, and it's all about emotion, and they can actually get to a solution versus just creating more of a problem and more tension in their relationships. It's those types of skills that we teach in the environment that we have, that we want to bring to the world. So quite frankly, we can make every family possible more functional and more fulfillable, or more fulfilling. I think what I would really love to have happen is, what no matter how much a man is entrenched in what we do over at Dad Edge, whether he just listens to the podcast or he's a one-on-one client or he's in the alliance or whatever, is that some way, shape, or form, we improve his family life, we improve his headspace, we improve his marriage and the relationship with his kids. And then he, if he so chooses, to teach those things to his kids, just as if you were to teach a kid how to fix a car or something like that. You're like, hey son, let me teach you a skill on how to fulfill a woman's needs, which she needs to feel seen, heard, and safe. And son, here's how you do that, right? Because those conversations aren't happening right now, right? But those are the things we want.
You know, that one-on-one time you mentioned earlier is so important. It reminds me of the family boardroom. Uh, yeah, I love that, and I've begun doing that with my boys too, and it's a really fun time. But it's important getting them, giving their own important time to just relax, and there's no other distractions. But I you have lofty goals for yourself, for your family, the community. I'm just not putting any more assholes out in the world, it would be a win for me.
Well, that's well said.
But I really appreciate you sharing your time today. Um, I think this is a great place to transition into the countdown to impact. That's the three books, two quotes, and one person who have all made an impact in your world.
So two quotes, is that good?
The three books, two quotes, one person.
Three books. Let me think. Okay, so I think the one book that really got my attention when I started doing this work was Unbeatable Mind by Mark Divine. He's a former Navy SEAL commander, and I'll tell you, like that was one book that I used to have this really scarcity mindset, and I still fight that battle to this day. But I would say I have more of a growth mindset now for sure. But that book was a game changer for me. It was by far one of my most favorite books that I've ever read. And if you're ever looking for a book on mindset, like that one was really good. Relentless by Tim Grover, by far one of my favorite, most favorite books. I just love that book, and I love Tim Grover. I had the honor of sharing the stage with him back in July at an event, so I got to speak with him on stage and got to meet him face to face, and that was just iconic for me. And then Gary John Bishop, he's the best selling author of several books, but one in particular that really got me, which was grow up, become the parents your kids deserve. And I'll tell you, that book will rattle you as a parent because you're like, it connects so many dots and it makes so much sense. And I just love Gary John Bishop. It's funny. Every time he launches a new book, I have him on the podcast and we joke about it. We're going to have the Larry and Gary show at some point, but that was a great book. So those are the three books. And then you said two quotes. Two quotes. I can think of one that I use all the time, and that is the definition of hell is meeting the man that you could have become when you're laying on your deathbed. That, and to be honest, like I can't think of another quote off the top of my head because that is the one I always go to. It's kind of it's literally like it's like a driving force in my life. So like for instance, when my kid wants one more hug or one more book or one more cuddle or one more conversation that he might need, and I'm tired and I don't feel like doing it or something like that, or I'm just whatever, right? I think about that quote of like, would I regret that? Or, is this the man that I really want to be? Is the guy who's taking the easy way out right now because he's maybe tired and it's been a long day or whatever else. I'm just trying to get this kid to bed, but yet he wants to just hang out with me for a few more minutes. And and I'll tell you, that quote really rings true for me, big time.
I love it. And one person who's made an impact in your life.
My grandfather. My grandfather. Here's what I'll say about my grandpa. My grandfather, while I didn't have a great dad, my grandfather only lived a mile from me growing up, and that guy never said it, but I think he knew the chaos that was going on in my house. Like he knew that his daughter, my mom was in and out of relationships. She was a big drinker, and there's a lot of craziness. And the guy just really just sort of stepped up, and he would pick me up every day after school. Um, Anytime he was doing anything, like fixing something out in his garden, doing some landscaping, cooking, he'd be like, hey kid, come over here. Like, come help Pawpaw. And I think that was his way of like, come with me. Let me teach you how to be a young man. And I'll close with this. Because this one kind of really tugs on my heartstrings. My grandfather was married to my grandmother for 53 years before he passed away. And my grandfather you talk about generational impact. That man taught me how to love a woman just by watching him love my grandmother. Like I would be sitting there at breakfast with them, and I would spend the weekends with them pretty often because my mom was kind of like dating and stuff like that. And I always loved being around them at their breakfast table, dinner table, or whatever. And I always knew that my grandfather was going to be affectionate. Like he was a blue collar, like tough dude. He was like a man's man, but he was so loving and affectionate at the same time. It was like this perfect mixture of a badass, but at the same time loving. and he would just reach over and grab my grandmother's hand and just rub it, and he'd like smile at her, kind of give her like that side smile and wink at her and be like, "You're so beautiful. Like, I just love you. I just love you." And like she'd walk by, like he'd be, and he'd like smack her on the butt, and he'd grab her and pull her on his lap. This guy's like 70 years old, pull her on his lap, and he'd kiss her cheek and stuff like that. And it was just, it was amazing. And I remember as a kid, I couldn't articulate it then, but I can now. Being in that environment made me feel so freaking safe, because it was like, man, there is like nothing but love here. And like, it's that type of environment. Like, you want to add like that feeling of family with your kid, love your wife and have your wife love your back. Like, that's what makes kids feel really good.
That's great you had that kind of influence in your life, not that stability somewhere. That's fantastic. Great example. Well, Larry, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate it. And where can people go to find out more and connect?
Yeah, I mean, so the podcast, you can find that anywhere. We're everywhere on the podcast. TheDadEdge.com has all of our resources. TheDadEdge.com/podcast. You got all of our podcasts there as well if you want to see show notes and resources and all that good stuff. If you're one of those guys that you're like, yeah, I want to skip all that and I just want to get right to getting to work and being uncommon and just learn these skills so I can be a badass and husband and father and just learn and grow, and come join us. Come join us over in our community. It's the Dad Edge Alliance. We've got two different programs over there. One is the Alliance, that's for our career guys, so our 9 to 5ers, and then we have one specifically for business owners, and that's called the Dad Edge Boardroom. So if you go to the dadedge.com/mastermind, you'll see those two paths, and you can self-identify if you're a business owner or not. That's pretty easy. And then you fill out an application, you book a call with our team, and we decide both ways. You know, it's not a sales call, it's a discovery call. So like, we want to get to know you, we want to get to know what's going on, and we want to make sure that you are the right fit for us, and we're the right fit for you, and that's how it works.
Awesome. We'll get that into the show notes. Larry, last question. What does living a life of impact mean to you?
Ooh, I think living a life of impact is legacy, generational impact. And I think this goes back to, you can either be a pond or you can be a river. A river flows into other bodies of water, right? A pond is just going to keep all whatever's in there, it's just going to keep it in there. And I think if you want to make an impact, you have to give knowledge, you have to give skills, you have to give to others in order for others to give to others, and then others become that river as well. So the impact is share what you're learning, share all the good things. And here's the other thing too. You don't have to be the expert to share. You could just be like, "Oh man, I just learned this thing, or I just heard about this thing on this podcast and I just started implementing it. I'm doing it. It's really working well," or whatever it is. But yeah, sharing, definitely.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of different examples or philosophies on that. Life is half full, or fill your cup up. And uh, one person said, you don't have to wait till your cup is filled to fill others up. Life is abundance. Cut the bottom of the cup off and let abundance flow through you. But then you mentioned Grover, and he said, cup is half full, half empty. It doesn't matter. Drain that cup, fill it again.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I was just thinking that when you mentioned the book. Anyways, Larry, thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Appreciate you back.